Manager at Recovery and Awareness Bone SA. Sandra, thank you very much for joining us. What a great pleasure to be talking about tissue donor.
Thank you, Patricia. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity.
For people who don't understand how critical it is for us to be donating tissue, please do explain to us.
Yeah, so I think it's important, Patricia, just to understand that tissue donation is very similar to organ donation, but at the same time different, in the sense that we can donate tissue for quite a while after death has already occurred. Of course, just like organ donation, this is something that we can only do after we have passed away. And tissue donation really consists of only 4 tissues. That is the cornea, which is a little piece of tissue, see-through tissue in the iris covering the iris of the eye. We're talking about skin tissue, bone tissue, and then also heart valves. So those are the 4 types of tissues we can donate, and all of it is exclusively for transplantation purposes.
How critical is it that we have donors, and what is the number of donors that are required in South Africa currently for tissue?
So, we all know about the great need that there is for organ donors, but in terms of numbers, the need for tissue far outweighs that, simply because it affects so many more people. And if we think about, for example, the need for skin, there are around about 268 serious burns in our country every month, which may require some kind of treatment with donated skin tissue. About 150 of those are children. So you can see that to be able to help children like that, suffering terrible burn wounds, that several donors will be needed to be able to help them. The same goes for corneas. It is estimated that in the Pretoria region alone, there's about 2,000 people annually waiting for a corneal transplant. That is only in one city. If you multiply that by all the cities in our country and we look at how few tissue donors there are going around, it just demonstrates how big the need is.
Definitely a huge need. Sandra, in terms of the difference between a tissue donor and an organ donor, what are the differences?
Well, in essence, the principles are the same. As individuals, we can decide to be an organ and tissue donor, which simply means at the time of my death, I would like to help somebody else with whatever part there is of my body that is still useful for somebody else to enhance or save their life. So we can register as an organ donor, but at the time of death, the circumstances around that death will determine whether one, at the end of the day, turn out to be an organ donor or a tissue donor. So the organ donor is typically a person who has suffered a severe head injury, a brain injury, whether it be spontaneous or because of an unnatural occurrence. That doesn't matter, but the patient is typically in ICU, in the hospital, on a heart-lung machine. And in those cases, that person is already declared brain dead, and organs can be donated in that case. And with organs, we mean everything in the chest cavity, the heart, lungs, kidney, pancreas, and so on. But the difference is with tissue donation, that kind of brainstem death is not required, blood circulation is not required. So anybody that dies in any other type of circumstance, whether it be at home, at work, next to the road, at church, wherever it may be, for whatever reason, can be a potential tissue donor, because blood circulation or oxygenated blood circulation is not required at the time of death.
A-teamers, let me put a question out to you. Are you keen on becoming a tissue donor or even an organ donor? Perhaps you've already registered yourself. Maybe call in and let us know on 011-714-2006. You can also WhatsApp on 0614-104-107. I know there's a lot of hesitancy when it comes to donations based on religion or tradition and culture. And educate us around those, and perhaps Sandra Fentet would be able to allay the fears that we might have around these. Sandra, in terms of people who are suitable, I know you say for tissue donors, you don't necessarily need circulating blood flow or oxygenated blood flow, but is there any age restrictions, any health limitations?
In general, we can say anybody can be a tissue donor. Of course, there are a few things that might preclude a person from becoming a donor, but all of that will be assessed at the time of death. Because, Patricia, you and I can decide today to be organ donors, tissue donors, doesn't matter. But our circumstances might change quite a bit between now and the day that we pass away. We might be in very good health now and maybe not by the time we get there. Or the other way around, actually. We can be sick now and become much more healthier in time. So in general terms, we say anybody can be a donor, but there are a few things, for example, serious transmittable disease, certain types of cancer that will preclude a person from becoming a donor. But all the general ailments that we all suffer so commonly here in South Africa, high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, heart disease, all of those things are not excluded, and one can still be a donor.
I've got an ATM on the line, Jay. Jay, good evening.
Good evening to you, Patricia, and good evening to our guests. I just walked into the room now and I heard this organ donor promotion or encouragement, as I would say. I think it's one of the most fantastic and most wonderful thing a human being can ever endeavor to take a step forward in life and after life. Because I think that's the best legacy you can leave behind of you, not the money or anything else, not your status, your academic results or whatever it is. I'll tell you, my son was 2 months from his 21st birthday, and he met a very serious head injury, and after 14 hours, they decided to operate on him. I told the doctor at that time, the doctor told me that he's got 50-50 chances. I said, doctor, okay, fine. I will sign off his organs should anything not come my way. If he does, God has given him back to the world, and he belongs to the world. Because doctor did explain he will not be completely normal. But God was wonderful in circumstances. Today, after 22 years, my son is still around, but he's not completely normal. And I thank God for that. But nevertheless, myself and the rest of the family, we all have decided to become organ donors. One question: what is the age limit to be an organ donor?
Jay, thank you for relating your story, and I do hope that you'll also sign up to be a tissue donor, because it's two different things. But and I'm glad to hear the testimony from your son. Sandra will definitely answer your question. Thank you.
Yes. What an absolute positive response there. Thank you very much. So we do have an upper age limit, and that's really defined by the ability to donate bone tissue. And we go up to the age of 80 years for men. And I think people find that surprising. Often we find people just over 50 thinking now they're too old. But no, not so. Up to 80 years for men and up to 75 for women. So up to that age, there is still something that can be used. And I just think that caller really nailed it on the head tonight to say that through this type of donation, we can help somebody else. That's what it is about ultimately. It's about helping someone else, saving another life when it's not possible for you, to carry on with your own.
Now, Sandra, I'm sure there's some legal repercussions, but before we come to that, in terms of tissue donors, let me ask you this question from Andres in Kwakwa, who sent a WhatsApp to us saying, why do we have healthy people as donors, but recipients pay enormous amounts for operations, since we have such a huge demand, but supply is low?
Right. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is, whether it is about the shortage or whether it is about the expense of treatment and the expense related to transplantation. So I'm unsure. So let me respond by saying that yes, the need is very big. Healthy people die every day in our country, and we can use healthy organs and tissues to treat people who are suffering some kind of disease, who had some kind of impairment due to a traumatic incident, cancer, or whatever the case may be, and we can help them through that. About cost, it is true that there are costs involved with transplantation. With donation, there isn't any cost at all for the family of the donor. But of course, with transplantation, there are certain services that we have to consider. You know, if we just think about blood donation, for example, somebody has to come to you, or you need to come to an event where you can donate blood. There's a nice comfortable chair to sit on. Somebody has to stick a needle into your arm, talk to you. You know, the blood gets drawn out. You get a glass of juice and cookie and whatever. A lady is very kindly helping you with that. Then the blood is tested. It is transported. It is processed in a way. It is stored. And then the recipient, again, on the other side, somebody must drive the blood to the person, put it into his arm again, and help him to get better. Now, so it's exactly the same with organs and with tissue. We don't pay for the actual blood or for the actual organ or the actual tissue, but for all those services involved to get the tissue, the organ, the blood from the donor ready and in such a state that it can be transplanted into the patient. So those are the costs that we're talking about.
But some would then argue and say, talking about the costs, in other countries, donors are reimbursed for organ donations, even blood donations. I mean, even here in South Africa, if you were to donate your ovaries, you are reimbursed for that. So why the difference when it comes to tissue donations?
Well, it's just taken up in law, Patricia. The Health Act stipulates very clearly that there cannot be any kind of reward for donation, and particularly where it comes to deceased donation. You can imagine if there are rewards going around for this type of thing, that we might risk our own lives. We might put other people's lives in danger if we start handing out rewards, money, whatever it may be, for donation. And I think the opportunity to perhaps, destroy the whole system can be very real. So it's something that we are not promoting, and that the South African law is definitely prohibiting.
Let's go to another ATM on the line, Tobani. Good evening.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, thanks.
Good. No, basically what's really happening...
Okay, Tobani's line has been dropped. Please do call again, Tobani, so we can hear your question or your comment. Sandra, in terms of the law, let's go to some of the laws regarding tissue donations.
Mm-hmm.
What are the laws governing the tissue donations?
Well, it's basically the Health Act of 2003, and together with that goes the regulations for tissue banks. There's a few basic principles that is prescribed, and one of the first things is informed consent. That basically is there to protect the donor and his family, and it basically says that when we ask consent for donation, we need to disclose everything and all the facts around that donation. It has to be done in a language that the person understands, and then it has to be followed up in writing with witnesses. So that is one example of how the law has been put there to protect the donor and his family, to not make it difficult to donate, but to regulate it properly. There's also a certain kind of order which is prescribed in the law of who can give permission for donation. And this is often the problem, Patricia, that you and I can decide to be donors, we can register to be donors, but the laws still prescribe at the end of the day, when we pass away, that our next of kin, a close family member, has to give consent, written informed consent for donation. So it's there to protect us. And then also, as it being a close relative or the next of kin, it also prevents somebody who is not really authorized to give permission for donation to do that. So that is the type of thing. It talks about tissue banks having to be authorized by the Department of Health to be able to recover, store and process tissue. So there's various aspects contained in the law that is there to regulate this whole sector and at the same time to protect donors and their families.
Here's a question via WhatsApp from an ATM saying, what's the law regarding organ harvesting in a Jane Doe?
In a Jane Doe, are we talking about an unknown person, I suppose, right? So an unidentified person. So the law does allow for unidentified people to be used for donation. However, the law at the same time says that the Director General of Health can give permission for such donation, but one has to ensure that all reasonable steps have been taken to locate the next of kin of the deceased or to establish, who the person is before such donation can be made. So it sounds all doable in theory, but unfortunately, the longest time that we can consider donation for, as in the case of bone tissue, is 5 days after death. So, I don't think any court of law is easily going to say that you have done everything reasonably possible to determine the identity and the next of kin of a deceased within 5 days. So practically speaking, that is not something that is workable for organ and or tissue donation. It's just not practically, we're not able to do that.
And James in Limpopo is asking, can you please comment on stem cell donation? He is already an organ donor and a bone marrow donor.
So stem cell donation, I'm not 100% familiar about stem cell donation, but I would recommend the South African Tissue Bank Association has a website, sattiva.org.za, and there are several stem cell banks listed there with all of their contact details. One can easily contact them and just discuss the options around donation. But stem cells is the new and a very very popular topic today. People see stem cells often as a cure for many things, but it is one of those things that are still in development, and there are not very conclusive evidence at this point yet of what all can be treated with stem cells.
So Sandra, how do we get in touch with Bone SA in order for us to get more information and maybe even sign up to become donors?
So, the best way, we have one platform to register as organ and or tissue donors. And look, the concept is the same. So we say it's the same thing. Whether you're an organ donor, tissue donor, it's one thing. And we all register on the website of the Organ Donor Foundation. And it's simply www.odf.org.za. You can go online. There's a very quick, very simple registration process. They will follow it up with a phone call, getting all your details, and then they will send you in the post information brochures and some stickers that you can put on your ID book and so on. Very useful, very helpful. If you put that sticker in your ID book, then it is easily identifiable. When something happens to you, perhaps in an accident or whatever, somebody will see that sticker and identify you as a potential donor, but still, at that time, the family will have to give consent for donation. And for that reason, it is so important that when we make the decision to become a donor, that we discuss it with our families. Tell mom and dad, this is what I would really like to do. And, the most beautiful stories sometimes come out of parents that say, this is a new thing for us. We're not used to this. Our generation didn't do that. But the young people of today are healthy, they're active, they're geared to serving others. And I am willing to donate just because my daughter, who maybe passed away, because she said she wants to be a donor, I am willing to do it. You know, so it's very, very important that while we want to register or should register, we have to talk to our families about that.
Excellent. Sandra, thank you very much for joining us and shedding light on tissue donation.
Thank you, Patricia.